Hello and welcome to the Hills Road Sixth Form College virtual open evening for English literature. I'm pleased to be comparing the event this evening, and I'm joined by the presenter, Mr. Cormac, who's a member of the English team here, and two second year students, Ben and Hannah, who will be able to explain their experiences of English literature and their aspirations. And there'll be a question and answer session following the presentation, where there'll be the opportunity to have your questions addressed by all of us. So I hope you enjoy the presentation, and I'll hand you over to Mr. Cormac now.
Hello, thank you very much for coming this evening. We're going to start off by talking about why study English literature at Hills, and also why study English literature, why literature in particular. First of all, it's important to celebrate our department. We've got a very intellectually stimulating and supportive department, a group of very creative and interesting teachers who are both hopefully stimulating, but also secure good results year after year. The thing about literature that I want to celebrate is it deals with human life in an unmediated way. It's about all the things, both transcendent and mundane, that we go through every day, whether it's falling in love or falling out of love, eating food, believing in God or rejecting religion. All of those core human experiences are part of what we study in literature. The German philosopher Martin Heidegger said that the thing about the modern world was that we've forgotten being. But literature is the place in which being is recalled, just the normal everyday aspects of life. So in a normal English lesson at Hills Road, you'll be introduced to challenging concepts, really fascinating concepts, whether they be from the world of history or from philosophy, as well as the wonderful things that have been written and thought about by writers. You'll be encouraged to engage in a range of debates, both within the lesson space, but also thinking about the debates that have gone on about literature, about politics, and about the roles of people throughout history through the literary texts that you're studying. A really important thing about literature is that we'll be asking you to think independently. It's a world that is outside of dogma, so it's a place where you'll be encouraged to open your mind and think freely. You'll be questioning assumptions, so both your assumptions about what literature is and what it can do, and what the sorts of people are who can write texts and can belong in the canon of literature, but you'll also be questioning assumptions about yourself as a reader. We like to say that books change the world and readers change the world. You can see that throughout history. There are key texts that have been massively influential in important historical moments. So we think of Uncle Tom's Cabin causing a massive change in the way slavery was viewed in the United States. We think of 1984 by George Orwell, or more recently, the works of Margaret Atwood, such as The Handmaid's Tale, and how influential they've been in the way people have thought about key issues in the world. So doing literature is your chance to participate in these big debates, these big ideas, and shape the big ideas for the world. Write the new stories that will determine the way the world goes in the future. So at English literature at A level, we follow the edXcel course. Currently, it has 4 components. Paper 1, for which I examine, is the drama paper. There are 2 sections. Currently, the texts we study are Hamlet and Waiting for Godot by Samuel Beckett. They're assessed in slightly different ways. In the question on Hamlet, you have to engage with literary criticism. So you're given an anthology of criticism that you study alongside the text. And in the exam, you have to engage not only with the question that you're asked, but with critical ideas. So you're engaging with how other people have responded to that text. For Waiting for Godot, the focus, as well as the text, is on the context that Samuel Beckett was writing on. So he's writing in the post-Second World War world, he's writing in the 50s, but also in the world of existentialism and the world after the nuclear bomb and after Auschwitz. In paper 2, which is the prose paper, You read two texts, and at the moment we have a choice which be dependent on which group you study in. You either do the stream that's called Science and Society, in which we study The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood, or Frankenstein by Mary Shelley, or you study Women in Society, which is Mrs. Dalloway by Virginia Woolf and Tess the D'Urbervilles by Hardy. In that exam, it's a 1 hour 15 exam. You're asked to compare the two prose texts and given a very general question. So it might be how are women presented, or how is science presented in these two texts? And really, it's up to you to develop your own responses to that very broad question. The third paper is poetry. The first section of that is a contemporary anthology of poetry called Poems of the Decade, which is poems from the Forward Prize for Poetry. And we've got, I think, 18 poems from that anthology that we study within class. And then in the exam, you're given an unseen, which you compare to one of the poems from the anthology. So that there are two choices, and you are given a specific question that goes with that poem. The other element of the poetry exam is we study the Romantic poet John Keats. So again, as was the case with Waiting for Godot, the key focus, as well as on the detail of the text, is on the context that John Keats was writing in. So we're looking in, he was writing in the early 19th century. So your key focus will be on studying the ideas behind Romanticism and the social and political change that was occurring during the early 19th century. Okay, I'm going to move on. I'm going to look at the things that, how this course compares with the two other courses that we teach in the English department, the English element of the English Media and Film department. And for that, I'm going to hand over to Mr. Lee to talk about the differences and the comparisons between literature and the other two courses.
Thank you. Well, English language and literature and its difference from literature is often a key question we have during open evenings, and it's a very valid question. There are some very distinctive features. There are arguably many more texts studied on the combined English course, and they are the greater variety in a way. That we include things like non-fiction texts, letters, diaries, journals, speeches, as well as a wider range of fiction texts, which can include sort of new publishing like blogs, that might incorporate fictional and non-fictional elements, but also things like film scripts as well, and radio drama scripts and things like that. So there's a greater coverage of texts, but these are usually taught in extract form. There are four main texts, and they include a modern American play by Arthur Miller, All My Sons, Fitzgerald's The Great Gatsby, which is actually compared under the theme of the individual and society with Philip Larkin's The Wits and Weddings anthology. We also look at a range of texts as stimulus for creative writing. And that's one of the things that draws students often to this course, creative writing, both fiction and non-fiction. So it allows students to work in reviews, journalistic articles, as well as write in the modes that they've been studying, like a dramatic monologue. And the idea is that they're heavily informed by books that they've studied, be it dystopian fiction, influenced by their reading of 1984, or monologue influenced by Alan Bennett's Talking Heads, for example. English language is a very different type of subject. Its title often can cause a bit of confusion in its link to, say, GCSE. It's very different from that. It's based on a lot of studies, fundamentally linguistic studies, but they also touch on areas linked to sociology, psychology, aspects of literature and theory, as well as history. You will see that some of the topics include how language evolves and develops from a very young age, child language development, It's also interested in how language changes according to events, social changes, and it incorporates field work as well as independent study. And there's also the opportunity to involve yourself in creative writing and being able to analyse your own work as well. Though that is actually a feature of language and literature. With the creative writing there is a kind of a commentary that's part of the coursework by which you sort of justify your choices and decisions made in putting your texts together. So that they are very distinctive subjects, all very, very fascinating and individual. And students have found each very, very rewarding. So yes, I think that you do need to sort of realise what they are. Just a reminder that you can go on and study English literature, having done English language and literature. And some students choose it because it offers a door perhaps to like applied English, things like law and journalism, because obviously we study a lot of journalism within the course. But that doesn't preclude students going on to literary careers from studying English literature, or even studying English language. So, the opportunities that come out of each subject there is some overlap, definitely.
It's worth saying that you can study English literature and English language A-levels together. However, if you study English language and literature, then you are precluded from studying the other two. It's also worth noting that there isn't any creative writing on the English literature course itself. However, often people who are very interested in creative writing will decide to study English literature and then use the English creative writing enrichment as an opportunity to explore what they're doing in their literary studies in terms of their own writing. So what skills will you develop during this course? Well, obviously, from what we've already said, one of the things that isn't necessarily listed here is the ability to read widely. You've got a very wide range of texts. You've got you're going back to the 16th and 17th century and looking at Shakespeare. Then you're looking at several 19th century texts, Keats and either Frankenstein or Hardy. And then a lot of fiction, poetry and drama from the 20th century. So you've got a wide range of references there, both what's more traditionally canonical and the elements that are less canonical. And actually, it's worth just me mentioning that the fourth element of the course, which is not examined, is the NEA, the coursework unit. At the moment, we're doing a unit on belonging, which involves the comparison of either the poetry of Derek Walcott or Andrea Levy's Small Island, or James Joyce's Dubliners, compared with Brian Friel's translations. So just sort of looking at the different sort of areas that English literature comes from. The key a key element of the skills that you will gain from doing an English literature course is the ability to form an argument. And this is very important in, it's why English is popular as a course to do at university prior to doing maybe a legal conversion, and why people who do English literature are actually often very popular for business careers, because forming an argument, the ability to think independently, construct an argument and find evidence for it is a key skill that you develop. Your ability to write, really, your ability to write coherently is a key skill that you develop through the English literature course. Alongside that, I think the other most important thing about doing an English literature course is the ability to analyse language, so detailed textual analysis. And I put here that it's not understanding, but overstanding. And that's to say that you might think of understanding as being able to understand what people intend when they say something. So understanding the manifest content of what is said. But in literature, we look beyond that. We want to be attuned to everything that language can do. All of the perhaps unintended meanings that come out of language, the unconscious meanings, but also the effects of sounds, the effects of particular word choice, and how they create a specific effect and a specific meaning. Another thing that we study is the relationship to context, to both the history under which a novel was written and the context in which it's read. So if we think of Shakespeare, we're not only interested in Elizabethan or Jacobean England when we're thinking of Shakespeare, we're also interested in thinking about how different generations of readers have created very different Shakespeares. So in the world after colonialism, in the world after feminism, Shakespeare changes. It becomes a different figure. So texts are always fluid, are always in a process of being made and remade. You'll also develop skills in terms of comparison. There are several points in the course, the prose texts and the poetry, where you're and in the coursework as well, when you're invited to compare texts, try to bring them into some sort of creative unity. So you're trying to see how these different texts speak to one another, how they illuminate different elements of them. And then we also look at these ideas of different interpretations. So we might look at particular schools of thought. So we might look at Marxism, post-colonialism, or feminism. We might think about different eras of readers. So we might think about romantic readers or new critical readers. And this is studied both in the coursework unit and in the Shakespeare unit in looking at critical responses to specific texts, which you need to include in your essays. But most importantly of all, the thing that you will gain from studying English literature is the ability and the chance to explore fascinating ideas without any constraints of dogma. So although I think philosophy and history are brilliant courses and I strongly recommend studying them, in a way you're constrained to a certain extent in studying those particular courses because they're sort of pushing you in a particular way. But with literature, you really are free to explore anything that you think is relevant or interesting. And you can really develop a very independent way of approaching texts. And we encourage that. Okay, there are 6 key assessment points each year. So with each text, there will be several points at which you'll be assessed. You might initially get a chance to write a shorter paragraph version of a response to a text, then build up to writing a full essay. We also have a variety of more formal assessments, such as mock exams. Last year, of course, under COVID, we were restricted in that, and so we had a very formalized version of that as an online assessment. Always, we try to ensure that you get all the support that you need. So, for instance, at the moment, Hannah and Ben will be working on an essay about the ghost in Hamlet. They'll have received an online lecture about that, and there's also an independent lecture that they can listen to. And they've had a very scaffolded lesson where they've been given a chance to work in groups towards producing this essay. So we don't just sort of throw you in the deep end. There's a variety of different forms of assessment. We'll always give you chances to self-assess your work. So for instance, with the coursework unit that again, Hannah and Ben will have recently submitted, the first draft, rather than being marked by us, was marked by themselves. They looked at it, they were given some instructions about how to look at it and check it to make sure it's included everything. And often we will ask people to self-assess using the exam board marking scheme so that they familiarise themselves with what examiners are looking for. There'll also be opportunities for marking each other's work and giving each other advice. There's different sorts of feedback that we offer. Obviously, there'll be written feedback. Often that feedback will be very focused on assessment objectives, trying to meet the criteria that will get you the right grade, which is, I think, why the department is so successful, because although in the teaching, we like to be really quite free and really quite experimental and expressive, when it comes to getting the skills of writing and knowing what it is that the exam wants, we really do hone those skills and make sure that people are sort of battle hardened when they come to do their exams. So there's also chances to look back over work, see what could be improved and making those changes. So we do pride ourselves in very carefully thought out processes of feedback and evaluation and improvement on people's work. I wonder, Ian, would you like to take over for this slide about support with the MF? That'd be all right, or would you like to carry on, Ian?
No, that's absolutely fine, Alistair. Yes, lots of support available. In class, always, we welcome students asking questions in the class itself or through email or the Teams system that we now operate with as well. So we will always try and get back, sometimes if students are working on individual essays and they've got a particular thesis and they want to sort of say, would this be relevant or am I going in the right direction? Very points of that nature, are often very, very, rewarding and interesting to respond to. We'll always do our best to respond to as many as we can in that development process. As Alistair mentioned, there is a lot of scaffolding, as it were, very structured approaches for moving students from the sort of GCSE mode up until the A-level form. And the distinctive features of A-level, such as the ability to sort of write in a critically evaluative way and to draw on critics, to not so much to lean on, but to help sort of shape your own sort of individual opinions and arguments, to sort of use them as a basis on which to go forward and not to feel shy of doing that. So we will often do that because it's a very it's composed of many different elements, including evaluation of critics, use of contexts, as well as the essential sort of DNA of literature, how writers shape meaning, and the formation of good, cogent arguments. We tend to focus on these particular assessment objectives on their own, and then gradually bring them together so that they then become what's called like a synoptic study, which is the essence of the coursework, the NEA. So we do approach things in different ways, and indeed the A-level itself, different parts of it have different emphasis. For example, at the moment we're looking at Hamlet, and there's a great weighting towards the use of critics in that context as well, but more marks are going on the use of critics. So we dwell on those particular assessment objectives and then ensure students have confidence there. Peer group support is hugely important. We do encourage students to work together. Even now we have a classroom set up so we can have meaningful pair group work going on. But in the online forums as well, we're encouraging students to work together and explore ideas in discussion groups and breakout groups, as well as share ideas in the development process of their writing. We encourage students to show drafts of introductions that they're working on and comparative paragraphs and things of that nature. The department always puts on a series of plus sessions. These occur in other subjects as well, basically to give students additional support, most of which is one-to-one and very much targeted on individual issues and problems that the student might face as they go through the course. So these are often put on sort of lunchtime periods. We hope to be running these as well through Teams remotely, as well as during face-to-face weeks in the current situation. Of course, that might be very different when you come to join the college next year, hopefully back to normal. And then EMF Extra for support for university applications for all students who wish to go forward with literature courses, and also for students wishing to go for Oxford or Cambridge. So we provide help there, basically in terms of engaging with the interview process, wider reading, critical reading, ensuring that students engage in a breadth of reading, like a historical spread of texts, and of course help with the sort of structure of the personal statement as well. So lots of different support across that time.
It's worth mentioning as well that we give support for people doing the ELAT test in preparation for application to Cambridge, to Oxford and Cambridge. So we have a variety of extension and enrichment opportunities. We have visiting speakers. So last year we had Professor Catherine Belsey come to talk about her essay on the ghost in Hamlet. We have Zoom talks from outside speakers. So we have people coming in. We do try to get trips to subject-specific events. We try to go to see exhibitions and to as much as we can, whether it's a production of a relevant play or that sort of offer that we make. We do have ventures with Cambridge University and other HE providers. So we worked with Anglia Ruskin as well. They offer a sort of taster day, which we encourage people to attend. We're always producing reading lists and viewing lists of great films or great books that we think are going to be a brilliant thing for people to read to broaden their horizons. And there are opportunities to write for publications. So we've got the Phoenix magazine, and we also encourage entry of competitions. And we also have had some people doing work experience, for instance, at CUP. As you can see, our performance in exams is substantially above the national average. So we have 79% A star to B grades and 100% A star to E. That's the average over 3 years. So people who study English literature do English literature, they do creative writing, English with philosophy, English with history, English with French, English with film, English language study, history, law, social policy, and even the natural sciences. We do have people who study both English and the sciences and go on to do sciences or medicine. Often it's a really nice way of balancing out your different skills. If you're spending all your time doing the sciences, it's nice to have something else that's dealing with a different part of your brain. And as you can see, the spread is 89% in higher education, 5% employment, 1% apprenticeships, and 4% to other further education opportunities. Okay, I didn't want to not include our very wonderful Year 13 students who very kindly agreed to come and talk. Ben Wormold and Hannah Musk are very interesting people to hear from, because both of them are applying to do English literature at university. But when they were in your position, thinking about what courses to do, they didn't necessarily think that English literature was something that they wanted to do. But having experienced English at Hills, they've become very enthused by it, and they're both keen to tell you about their experiences of English literature at Hills. So maybe Ben, if you could start, and then Hannah, you can go after.
Hello, everyone. So by the end of secondary school, I was in a bit of a weird situation with English, in that I was getting on with the exam process. I was feeling kind of confident, but I was starting to doubt whether or not the exam process was something that I was getting in the way of my passion. And so when it came to the sixth form A-level application point, I was kind of in quite a weird situation, because I've always had a sort of aspiration to go down a filmmaking route or a musical route. But I knew I wanted to kind of keep involved in the sort of analytical approach to an extent. So, and I've always had a love of reading. So I kind of debated going for English language, because I thought I might want to go down more of a practical creative approach. I considered doing the mix of both, and then I sort of came to a decision about my other subjects, which are music and German first, and they sort of dictated that, because with the other subjects, I was like in music, I'm getting sort of a creative outlet there, and with German, I am as part of the German course, you look at films there. I thought, I will go out on a whim, I'll do English literature. I was very trepidatious at first, and from the first lesson, I absolutely fell in love with it. It's such a great course, just from the breadth of sources you look at, the different types of texts, the lesson formats, as Alistair said, they're so free. They're just discussions, really, where you're sharing your ideas about these really, really interesting texts. What I'd say as a great way that the A-level course progresses from GCSE is that GCSE is much more, you're kind of following a path to get to the exam. You're encouraged to kind of stay within what you've learned in lessons. The great thing about Hills is that the way they encourage you to read outside and read around your subject means that to every lesson, you're sort of bringing your own ideas, you're sharing those ideas, you're getting ideas from other people. And so when it comes to writing essays, there's much more of your own passion involved. Certainly for me, I've just found the different areas that you cover just around the text and the text itself just sort of broadens your mind so much. Yeah, I absolutely love it. So as I've said, or as Alice said, I'm thinking of doing English at I've applied to do English at university. I came quite late to the idea that this is for sure what I wanted to do. I sort of picked the course as a way where you can progress to so many different career opportunities from that. So, for example, I think Christopher Nolan, the famous film director, he studied English literature, and obviously people go on to journalism, law, all of this, and really it's just you build an appreciation for just the ambiguity and the different meanings that a text can have, but you're also gaining an insight into the person who wrote it, their lives, their experiences, and you're just absorbing so much, and the way it's taught and the course itself, your own passion kind of gets fed as well. So yeah, I can't speak highly enough of it.
So choosing English literature was not a hard decision for A-level. I knew that I loved it at GCSE. To be honest, and it's what's Ben said, is that you only learn a limited amount. I studied, I think, 2 novels. I mean, compared to A-level, it's a big step, and I know people worry about this, but I genuinely believe that whatever A-level you're going to do, it's going to be a big step. So just make sure you're choosing something that you love. It's really, really important. And you don't necessarily have to love it, but I mean, it's always a benefit if you do. And also you end up, falling in love with it to some extent. So I think just trust the process and choose English if you want to choose English literature because you love reading, because you love exploring. If you want to build your communication skills, there's so many advantages of taking English literature. If you know you like it, why wouldn't you take it? I chose it because I love to read. That was a benefit, and also I was excited to learn about poetry, drama, going to Shakespeare. There was so many routes, and also with coursework, if you guys really like coursework, that's, not many courses do coursework. It gives you a bit of an advantage once you actually eventually come to the exam process. You've done 20% of your exam. That could be, good for some people, but for me, it's a big advantage. You could also choose the coursework that you choose as well. So I chose post-colonialism, which was an area that I wanted to further my understanding, and I've been able to do that. So I also take history and politics, and I took politics on a whim. I was going to take economics, but they tie in so well together. Your subjects don't have to tie in. I know someone who does biology. I mean, really don't feel like you have to go down one path. Humanities was you can tell that I really like humanities because of my choices, but just choose whatever, and you'll actually find that the context that you learn for English literature will, tie in with politics or history or whatever you're doing. It's all very relevant, and just do what you like and you'll be fine.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Hannah. Thank you very much, both of you.
And we've got some questions that have come through. For example, Eva asked the question, how much homework do we get a week for English literature? So measured in a week. So I suppose that's an interesting question in itself, isn't it? Because often an essay would probably be set with maybe a fortnight for you to sort of think it through, plan it, and then write it. But it's possible that one side of the course would set a piece, so you're finishing that off like 2 weeks hence, and then there's a deadline in between from what the other teacher has set. But it isn't all essays. Often, it's reading and annotating and coming prepared to the lesson to discuss, or perhaps some suggested wider reading by the writer, or critical reading, again, to absorb and inform the discussion.
I was just saying, it's worth saying that we have 8 hours, where 4 hours are face-to-face, and there are 4 hours expected of independent learning. Some of that will be something that we set. Sometimes we'll expect you just to be doing that on your own. So maybe doing, as Ian said, some reading around, or something that you're looking into for yourself. I'm conscious we've only got not too long left, so maybe we ought to sort of move through a few questions quite quickly.
Yes, it's got, will English language or literature provide more career opportunities? I don't think so. I mean, I think they all offer a lot. I think if you're talking about English language and literature as a combined course, I think it offers the same opportunities that English literature does. I think if you're talking about English language on its own, that would probably direct you more to, say, a linguistics course at university, or English language linguistics course than literature would. And that might, then feed into a career that might look at things like language therapy, or combine with areas of careers which might derive from psychology or even science. So I think the English language, English literature divide is perhaps more significant than the English language and literature combined course and literature, where the destinations are often very, very similar indeed. A lot are about subjects as well. Do you pick whether you do science and society or women in society as the prose options? Normally that was just down to which teacher the students had in the group. So it roughly worked out that half of the lessons were focused on women in society and half were on science and society. But in preparation for the course over the summer, students would read a book from each side, the oldest book. So you'd be asked to read Frankenstein and Tess of the D'Urbervilles. So you would be prepared for either of those options. And both are such tremendous texts that there would be no loss in having read either of those. So we've tended to find that some students will say, oh yes, that's exactly what I wanted, but within a couple of lessons everybody is absolutely fine with the books, because as Alistair was saying, and Ben and Hannah were saying, there are just windows onto so many different areas through those books. You're looking at so many fascinating periods of history, social changes through them. And I think the way that writers are also innovative in their form makes it exciting as well.
Could I just answer some of the more factual questions just very quickly, just so that people have them answered? So the exam board is edXcel. That's the exam board that we study. We study 10 texts, so it's 2 for each of the exam units, and then you study 4 for the coursework, you're choosing 2 to write on. And there is coursework, so there are 3 exam units and 1 coursework unit.
Yes, absolutely. Those are the basic sort of statistics, as it were of the course. I'm just scrolling down. There's lots of other ones. Does it go well with the arts? Yes, we have lots of students doing either art as a practical course or indeed as history of art. It goes very well with that, as it does with things like film studies, other text-based courses. How big are the classes? Well, they're usually between about 22 and 24. That's how big the classes would be. Are they based on ability? Not at all. No, there's no streaming at all in the A-level courses. Does it combine with drama? Again, students doing drama, theatre studies, many do English as well, or different Englishes. Would you mind elaborating more on the coursework aspect, like the sorts of themes available to explore, the novels available to explore, etc.?
Should we ask the students to answer that one? That'd be...
Yes, so actually your teacher decides 2 strands that they are more familiar with. I am doing, as I said, post-colonialism. I'm looking at Derek Walcott, which is poetry, and I'm also looking at Small Island by Andrea Levi, which is what I chose, which I think is it's a big advantage. It's the same with also just history as well, just to say. And you get to choose which coursework you're doing. And of course, if you're going to write a big piece of work, which also, by the way, coursework is so useful for undergraduate study, whether you are doing that, whether you're doing English literature, whether you decide to continue with it or whether you don't, it is extremely useful. So I think that's definitely a skill in itself to build. I think there's also, and my other teacher, he does a strand with Prime of Miss Jean Brodie, and I can't remember the other one, but it's on society. They're all grouped by themes.
Remains of the Day is the one that he studies with Prime Minister.
Yes. remains of the day. And I think also there's the strand. I don't know if this one much, but I think one of you guys might know the next strand. So there's three choices, so many choices, and you'll end up you get to have a little bit of a taste in each, and you always have the support from your teachers. They're so great with that. And if you feel like you're kind of in the deep end or anything, they will help you, they will guide you. We're doing it right now, so we're experiencing it right now, and the amount of support we've got is immense. Even if under the circumstance with COVID-19, it is the exact same, and you can always get help. So don't worry about that. I think a lot of people stress about COVID-19, the effect it can have, especially on Hill's teaching. It really isn't that different. We're all surviving and we're all still thriving. So if we can do it, then you guys can do it too. And also, I think by the time you guys join, it will be hopefully better. So.
I think Ben did the other strand, so it might be worth you just talking about the other strand of coursework, Ben.
Yeah, so my two texts were Dubliners by James Joyce and Translations by Brian Friel. So they're both Irish texts, kind of centered around that, but the context in which they're written are very different. So Dubliners, written by James Joyce in the early 20th century, so pre-Troubles, in a kind of period of cultural stagnation, and it's kind of detailing metropolitan life and kind of snapshots. They're short stories, snapshots of different people's lives within the city. And then Translations is a play set in the 1800s during the Ordnance Survey, so the British coming through and basically changing the geography of a small Irish town. And what I found with my essay, I chose change as my theme, quite a broad one, but the more I read around it and the closer I looked at each of the texts, I found some really interesting ideas that inspired me to read some other books from that vein of culture and history. And it's a great opportunity to immerse yourself in the academic process. But beyond that, you're really getting a very thorough insight into two kind of very different but quite relevant sources.
I might just quickly rip through a few questions just to cover as many as I can before the end of the session. So Heidi asks, are the essay structures similar to the GCSE structures for English literature? I mean, they're recognisable. You'll know that you're doing an essay in English literature. However, I would say the way you write in A-level is more expansive. The way you analyse the text is less focused in on individual sort of atoms of meaning. You're looking at broader structures such as sentence level things, symbolic structures, those sorts of things, rather than looking in at words. But you'll recognise that it's the same sort of skill. Let me see what else. Would you advise taking English literature for law at university, or would history be better? I think both of those, I think they're both equally well suited to conversion at law. So it really just would depend on what you feel that you're more passionate about. That's from Isabel, thank you. And Elizabeth says, our class is usually more similar to lectures or discussions. When we have our lessons together in college, which is half the time at the moment, they're much more like discussions. They're not really lectures. You don't get very much teaching for the front. We'll set up things, we'll invite groups to work, and then we'll feedback in a plenary and discuss our outcomes. And even when we're doing large online lectures, we will often have a moment where people break out into smaller groups, get a chance to discuss. Are there opportunities to discuss one-to-one with the teacher? Frequently. You'll get lots of one-to-one feedback about your essays. And particularly if you're finding things difficult, then a teacher will always try to seek you out and give you opportunities to work and give you support on your work. James asks, would you mind elaborating more on the coursework aspect? I think we've done quite a lot of that. Does English literature pair well with philosophy? It does. It's very, very good to study philosophy and literature. I mean, in a way, you are studying philosophy and literature, you're just sort of studying it on the go. Whereas with philosophy, it's sort of more like something where you have to, you're sort of constructing logical arguments. Whereas in English, you're studying it, the passion, the intensity, I think. And then does English literature, I think that's the last one. So I think we've got through, I've rushed a little bit at the end, but I think we can start to wrap up. So thank you very much for watching our presentation. Thank you very much to Hannah and to Ben for helping us. And if there are any questions that we missed out, we will try to get back in touch with you and answer any questions. We're always going to be available. If you contact the admissions team, they would hand on questions to the English department, and we'd be able to get back to you with any questions. So yeah, thank you so much for watching, and I think that's the end. So thank you, and good evening.
Thank you very much.